Sir, this line is for people who can actually pay. She didn't whisper it. She said it the way people say things when they've decided the person in front of them doesn't warrant the courtesy of a lowered voice. The old man's hands went still on the counter. The coins stopped moving, and Keanu Reeves, standing 3 feet behind him in line with a bottle of water and a granola bar, heard every word. He didn't move right away. He just watched. The old man's shoulders had done something. A small collapse, barely visible, the kind of thing that happens when a person absorbs a hit they've stopped expecting to dodge. His name, Keanu would learn later, was Raymond Kowalski. He was 74 years old. He had served 2 tours in Korea. He was $9.11 short on groceries that Tuesday morning, and the cashier at Crawford's Market in Bozeman, Montana, had just made sure the entire checkout area knew it. What happened in the next 12 minutes would not make the national news. No cameras caught in full, but everyone who was in that store that morning would carry some version of it for the rest of their lives. It was a Thursday in late October, and Keanu had been in Bozeman for 3 days. He was there quietly, the way he preferred. No entourage, no publicist, no prearranged appearances. A friend owned a small ranch outside of town and had offered it as a place to decompress between projects. Keanu had driven himself from the airport in a rented truck, checked in under a different name at a motel, and spent the first 2 days reading, hiking, and doing the specific kind of nothing that becomes necessary when you've spent months doing everything. On the 3rd morning, he needed groceries. He needed coffee and something that wasn't motel vending machine food. And someone at the front desk had mentioned Crawford Market on Gallatin Street as the place locals actually went. Not the big chain out on the highway, but the smaller, family-owned place with the good produce and a hot food counter. He'd pulled on jeans, a flannel shirt that had been through enough washes to be the right kind of soft, and a dark wool cap that he pulled down to just above his eyebrows. He was not hiding exactly. He was just not announcing himself, which was a different thing. Crawford's was everything the motel clerk had described. Narrow aisles, produce stacked in wooden crates, a deli counter with actual hand-lettered signs, the smell of fresh bread from somewhere in the back. Keanu moved through it slowly, picking up things he didn't strictly need because the store had the particular quality of places that make you want to stay a little longer than you planned. He grabbed coffee, a granola bar, a bottle of water, and then stood for a moment deciding whether he needed the jar of honey before deciding that he did. He got in line at register 2 behind a woman with a full cart, and behind her, an elderly man with a small basket. The old man's basket held a loaf of whole wheat bread, a dozen eggs, a half-gallon of milk, a small container of oatmeal, and a package of sliced turkey. Basic food. The kind of shopping that is not about preference, but about calculation. What do I need to get through the next several days? And what can I afford? The cashier at Register 2 was a woman named Deborah Tilson. She was 31 years old and had worked at Crawford's for 4 years, which was long enough to develop a specific kind of efficiency that, in her case, had shaded over time into something that looked less like professionalism and more like impatience dressed up as competence. She was fast with the scanner. She did not make small talk. She had, in the observation of several longtime employees, a way of looking at certain customers that communicated, without words, that she had categorized them and found them wanting. She scanned the old man's items. $12.48, she said, already looking at the screen rather than at him. The old man nodded and reached into the front pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a wallet, brown leather, thin, worn at the fold, and opened it. Keanu saw the same thing from where he was standing. The wallet was nearly empty. A few coins in the change pocket. No visible vides. Okay, the old man said quietly, more to himself than to anyone. Okay. He began pulling coins out and setting them on the counter with the deliberateness of someone who has done this before and is not embarrassed by it yet. Quarters first, then dimes, then nickels. Deborah watched him count. She did not help. She did not look away. She watched with the particular expression of someone whose time is being consumed by a situation they find beneath them. The old man counted out $3.37. He checked the change pocket again. It was empty. He stood there for a moment. I thought I had more, he said. I'm sorry. I had a 20 this morning, but I paid the electric, and I thought I had more left. Sir, Deborah said, and her voice had that quality. Not cruel exactly, but precise in a way that functions as cruelty. This line is for people who can actually pay. The woman with the full cart behind Keanu made a sound, somewhere between a sharp intake of breath and the beginning of a word she didn't finish. A teenage boy at the next register looked over. The man running the deli counter, visible through the pass-through window, had gone still. The old man's hands went still on the coins. He did not respond immediately. He looked at his basket. He looked at the $3.37 on the counter. He looked at Deborah. And then, with the quiet dignity of a man who has survived things that would have broken most people, he began to put the coins back in his wallet. "I'll put the turkey back," he said. "And the milk. I can come back for those." Keanu set his items on a belt. He did it calmly, without drama. He placed the coffee, the granola bar, the water, and the honey behind the old man's basket. Then he stepped forward slightly and spoke to Deborah in the same, even tone you'd use to discuss the weather. "Ring everything together," he said. "His and mine." Deborah looked at him. "Sir, I can't just—" "You're not doing anything unusual," Keanu said. "You're ringing up groceries. His happened to be in front of mine. That's a standard transaction." He paused. "I've got it." The old man had turned around. He was looking at Keanu with the expression of someone trying to determine whether what was happening was real. "I can't let you do that," he said. "That's not right. I'll go to the ATM and come back." "You don't need to do that," Keanu said. "I'm buying my coffee and some honey. Your groceries are already on the belt." He looked at Deborah. "Total, please." Deborah looked between them. Something had shifted in the air of the checkout lane in a way that she hadn't fully processed yet. She ran the old man's items again, added Keanu's, and read the total. $16.81. Keanu handed her his card. The old man was still looking at him. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. I'm not usually in this position. My check comes on the 15th, and sometimes the timing just..." He stopped. "Start again." "Thank you. Really? You don't need to thank me," Keanu said. "I'm just buying coffee." The transaction processed. Deborah handed back the card. The old man collected his bag, and Keanu collected his, and they moved to the side of the lane together in the way that people do when a moment has created a brief and unexpected connection. "Raymond," the old man said, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Raymond." They shook hands. "You look familiar," Raymond said, studying him with the careful attention of someone who knows his eyes aren't what they used to be. "I can't place it. I just have one of those faces," Keanu said. Raymond smiled. It was a good smile, the kind that had weathered into something genuine. "Are you from around here?" "Just visiting. Friend has a ranch outside town." "Bozeman's a good place," Raymond said. "I've been here 32 years. Came after I got out of the service. Quieter than where I grew up, and I needed quiet by then." "What branch?" The question came naturally, the way it always does when you can read a man's history and how he carries himself. Raymond stood a little straighter. "Army. Korea. 67 to 69. A pause. "Second tour was rougher than the first." "Thank you for your service," Keanu said. "Genuinely." Raymond nodded once, the acknowledgement of a man who has received this phrase enough times to recognize when it means something and when it doesn't. This time it meant something. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the steadiness of the man's eyes when he said it, the lack of performance. "You didn't have to do what you just did," Raymond said. "I know," Keanu said. "That's sort of the point." What happened next happened slowly, and then all at once, the way things do when a small moment of genuine decency acts on a room full of people who have been watching and waiting for permission to be their better selves. The woman who had been behind Keanu in line, a woman in her 50s named Carol, who ran a dental practice on the north end of town and had been coming to Crawford's every Thursday morning for 11 years, approached Raymond as he was adjusting his bag. "Excuse me," she said. She held out 2 folded $20 bills. "For next time, when the timing is off." Raymond looked at the money. "I can't take that." "My mother was a nurse," Carol said. "She worked 30 years and retired on a fixed income that never quite covered everything. I always wish someone had done this for her." She closed his hand around the bills. "Please." Raymond's eyes filled. He didn't speak. The teenage boy who had been watching from the next register. His name was Jake. He was 17. He worked Thursdays after school and had exactly $43 in his wallet. Walked over and held out a 10. I don't need this today, he said, with the particular straightforwardness of teenagers who haven't yet learned to make generosity complicated. The man from the deli counter came out. He was in his 40s, built like someone who had done physical work his whole life, and he put a 20 on the counter without saying anything. Within 5 minutes, Raymond Kowalski was standing at the exit of Crawford's Market with his groceries paid for, $83 in cash that strangers had quietly pressed into his hands, and the specific stunned expression of a person who came in expecting the worst of a morning and received something so opposite that their entire understanding of the day has been reorganized. Keanu stood with him through most of it, not orchestrating anything, just present. When the last person had approached and the moment had reached its natural end, Raymond finally looked at Keanu directly. I need to ask you something, he said. Keanu waited. Are you who I think you are? A small pause. Then probably. Raymond laughed. A real laugh, the surprise kind that comes out before you can stop it. Well, he said. Well. He shook his head. My granddaughter is going to lose her mind. How old is she? 16. She has a poster of you on her bedroom wall. I never understood it. I do now. Keanu smiled. Tell her hello for me. I will. Raymond's expression settled into something more serious. Can I say something? Of course. I've been having a hard year, Raymond said. Not just the money. My wife passed in February. 41 years, and then she was gone. And there are days where it feels like I'm just waiting to stop having days. He paused. Today was one of those days before I came in here. I almost didn't come. I thought, what's the point of any of it? He looked at his bag of groceries. And then this. He gestured at the door, the space behind them, the whole improbable morning. A stranger paid for my groceries, and a room full of people I don't know reminded me that they see me, that I'm still here and it still matters. He looked at Keanu. You have no idea what you just did. Keanu was quiet for a moment. I think I might have some idea, he said. I'm sorry about your wife. She would have loved this story, Raymond said. She always said the world was better than the news made it look. This would have been evidence. There's a side to this story that Raymond didn't see because it happened behind the counter after he left. Deborah Tilson had been watching the entire sequence of events from a register. She had watched the woman with the 20s, the teenager with the 10, the deli man with the 20. She had watched the space around register 2 transform in the span of 6 minutes, from a place of small humiliation into something that people would talk about when they got home that evening. She had also, somewhere in the middle of it, recognized the man who had stepped forward to pay. She had said nothing during the event itself. She had processed the transaction. She had done her job. But something had been working in her since the moment Keanu had spoken. Ring everything together. His and mine, with that particular absence of performance, that flatness of tone that communicated he was not doing this for anyone watching. She had done the things she'd done. She had said what she'd said. She had stood there with the specific authority of someone who had categorized a person and acted on that categorization. And she had been wrong. Not just factually wrong about the money, but wrong in the deeper way, the way that is harder to name. Bill Crawford, who owned the store and whose family had owned it for 31 years, had been in the back office doing inventory when Jake, the stock boy, came and told him what had happened. Bill was 63 years old, had seen most things, and was not particularly given to dramatic responses. He came out quietly, assessed the situation, and sent Jake back to work. Then he walked over to Deborah's register. Close up when you're done with this customer, he said. Come see me in the office. The conversation that followed was not loud. Bill Crawford was not a man who conducted himself loudly. But it was direct, and it was honest, and it covered certain things that Deborah Tilson had not been confronted with before in quite that way. The way a remark made in a register line travels, the way it lands on the person it's made about, the way it reflects on the people and the place around it. Bill talked about his father, who had opened this store in 1991 with the specific philosophy that every person who walked through the door deserved to be treated as though they were the most important customer of the day. Because on some days, for some people, a grocery store was the most human contact they were going to have. I don't know what Raymond Kowalski's day looked like before he came in here, Bill said. I don't know what he's carrying. What I know is that when he left, he felt seen. That's what this store is supposed to do. What happened at your register before that man stepped up is the opposite of what we're here for. Deborah didn't argue. There wasn't anything to argue. She sat across from Bill with the expression of someone processing something they've been shown clearly and can't pretend they didn't see. She was put on a week of unpaid leave. When she came back, she was reassigned to stock and receiving, away from the customer-facing registers, while she completed a customer service retraining program that Bill Crawford had quietly funded at the community college. It was not a punishment designed to humiliate her. It was a consequence designed to teach something. She completed the program. She came back to the register 3 months later. In that 3 months, she had thought about register too more than about anything else. She had thought about Raymond's hands going still on the coins. She had thought about her own voice, the specific flatness of it, the way it had landed. She had thought about the fact that she had not known who Keanu Reeves was when he stepped forward, that she had looked at him the same way she'd looked at Raymond, and had only adjusted when she recognized him, which meant the adjustment was about recognition, about status, about a system of worth she had built without examining it. That was the part she kept returning to. Not, I was rude to a famous person, but I was measuring people, and the measurement had nothing to do with their actual value. When she came back to the register, she was different in the specific way that people are different when something has genuinely arrived. Not perform change, but actual change. The kind that shows up in small things. How long you hold eye contact, how you hand back change. Whether you look at the person or at the screen. One Thursday in February, Raymond Kowalski came back to Crawford's. He came in on Thursdays now because it was the day his check cleared and he wanted to shop while the number felt real. He got in line at register 2. Deborah was on shift. She looked at him. She remembered. She could see him register her as the same person, could see the slight adjustment in his posture that people make when they are bracing for something. "Good morning," she said. And then, "How are you today?" It was not a transformation. It was not a moment of grand reconciliation. It was 2 words delivered the way 2 words should be delivered, like they meant something, like the answer mattered. Raymond looked at her for a moment, reading it, and apparently found what he was looking for. "Better than last Thursday," he said. "Better every week, actually." She smiled. It was a small smile, a little uncertain, the smile of someone still learning how to do something they'd gotten out of the habit of. "Good," she said. "Good, I'm glad." She scanned his items. $12.62. He had the exact change. She counted it out carefully, the way she now let all her customers count, without sighing, without performing impatience for the benefit of the line behind. "Have a good week," she said. "You too," he said. And that was it. That was what it looked like. Not a movie moment, not an apology scene with swelling music. Just 2 people at a register in Bozeman, Montana, treating each other the way people are supposed to. The story spread the way stories spread in small cities, organically, imperfectly, through the mouths of people who were there and people who heard it from people who were there, gaining small embellishments in some retellings and losing details in others, but retaining, in all versions, the essential shape of what happened. Bill Crawford, who was not given to sentiment but was given to honesty, put up a small laminated sign near each register. It read, "Every customer who walks through this door is someone's whole world today. Treat them accordingly." He didn't attribute it to anyone. He had written it himself the night after the incident, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and the kind of clarity that comes when a day has shown you exactly who you want to be and whether you've been getting there. The Veterans Assistance Fund that was established at Crawford Market was not named after anyone. Bill didn't want it to be. He wanted it to feel like the stores, like the communities, something ongoing and ordinary rather than memorial. Employees could access it for customers who came up short. No forms, no approval process, no bureaucracy. You saw someone who needed it, you used it, you noted it in the log. It was replenished regularly, partly from the registered change jars at checkout, partly from a quiet monthly contribution from a donor who had requested anonymity and whose identity most people at the store had guessed correctly. Raymond Kowalski did not find out about that until 6 months later when Bill told him over coffee in the office. He set it up the next week. Bill said. Called me himself. Raymond was quiet for a long time. He was looking at his coffee cup, and then out the window at the parking lot, and then at nothing in particular. He didn't have to do that, he said finally. No, Bill agreed. That's sort of the point. Keanu Reeves has not spoken about this story publicly. He doesn't talk about things like this. There's a pattern in the stories that circulate about him. Most of them unverified but internally consistent, that suggest a person who does things not for the record, but because the record is not the point. The story of the grocery store in Bozeman circulated in that community for months before anyone thought to post it publicly. And by the time a version appeared online, it was already secondhand and partial and missing most of the specifics. What it retained was the shape, a man in line, an old man with coins, a voice that could have stayed quiet, a choice made without announcement. Raymond, when someone eventually asked him about it, said this: "People want to know what it felt like. They want me to say it felt like meeting a celebrity or like being in a movie. It didn't. It felt like someone looked at me and saw a person who needed help and helped him. That's what it felt like. The rest of it is extra." He paused. "The rest of it is good extra. I'm not complaining about the rest of it." He smiled. But the center of the story is just a person looking at another person. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's a moment that Raymond has described to a few people, always in the same way, with the same particular attention to detail that suggests it lodged somewhere permanent. He was walking out of Crawford's with his bag and his groceries and the money that strangers had quietly given him, and he pushed through the door into the October morning, and the cold air hit him, and he stopped. He stood there on the sidewalk for maybe 30 seconds, not doing anything, just standing. He had come in that morning carrying the specific weight of a bad year. The grief of February, the loneliness of afternoons, the low-grade humiliation of a fixed income that did not always quite reach. He had been in that store, counting coins, and feeling the particular shame of being seen doing it, the shame of needing to be seen doing it. And then a voice from behind him had said 4 words and reorganized everything. He stood on the sidewalk in the October cold, and he felt something lift. Not all the way, not permanently, but enough that he could feel the difference. He looked up at the sky. It was the kind of October sky that Bozeman does especially well. That particular pale blue, the mountains visible at the edge of the horizon, everything clean and cold and enormous. "All right," he said, to no one, to the sky. "All right." He picked up his bag and walked to his car. He drove home. He put the groceries away. He made oatmeal for breakfast, the oatmeal from the container that a stranger had helped pay for, and he ate it at the kitchen table where he and his wife had eaten breakfast for 38 years, at the table that still had 2 chairs at it, even though only one of them was ever used now. And he thought about what his wife used to say, the things she said when the news was bad and he was losing faith in the general direction of things. "Find me one person," she would say. "Just one. Find me one person doing something decent today." She meant it as a compass. There is always one. There is never not one. If you can find the one is enough to keep going on. He thought about that. And he thought about the man who had said, "Ring everything together, his and mine." And he thought about the woman with the 20s and the boy with the 10. And he thought that on this particular Tuesday, he had found considerably more than one. He finished his oatmeal. He washed the bowl. He was still here. He still mattered. The evidence was sitting in his grocery bag. It was enough. It was that morning more than enough. What Keanu Reeves did at Crawford's Market on that Thursday morning was on its face a small thing. He paid for a stranger's groceries. The cost was under $15. It took less than 2 minutes. But small things have a way of landing with weight that has nothing to do with their size, because what there is not really about the money or the time. They are about the decision, the split-second assessment of a situation where you could look away, where looking away would be easier, where most people look away and nobody blames them for it, and the choice, instead, to step forward. Raymond Kowalski did not need Keanu Reeves specifically. He needed anyone. He needed one person to see what was happening and choose not to let it happen the way it was going. In a different version of that morning, that person could have been anyone in that line, or the store manager passing by, or the teenager at the next register who eventually offered his $10 and could have offered it first. The reason the story matters, the reason it traveled through Bozeman and then further, is not because of who stepped forward. It is because of what stepping forward made visible. The hunger that was already in that room, the latent generosity of people who were waiting for someone to go first, who needed the permission of a first act before they could add their own. That is perhaps the actual lesson. Not that famous people should pay for veterans' groceries, though certainly they should, but that going first is available to everyone in that line, every time, and most of the time the room is full of people who would follow if someone would only lead. The voice that said, "Sir, this line is for people who can actually pay," was real, and its damage was real, and there are consequences for damage of that kind. Not just the formal ones that followed at Crawford's, but the interior ones that Deborah Tilson has been living with since. The ongoing work of becoming someone different than the person she was in that moment. But alongside that voice, and more powerful than it, is the voice that said, "Ring everything together." His and mine. That voice is also always available. It just needs someone to use it. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you.